On September 8, 2011, Mystic Mother Tracy Elise was arrested with 39 others during a police raid on the Phoenix Goddess Temple after an undercover operation found the church to be a guise for a brothel. Initially indicted on 48 counts, she was ultimately found guilty on 22 counts. State of Arizona versus Elise began with Miss Elise being found incompetent to stand trial. Once competency was restored, the next 3 years would consist of a lengthy pretrial and a 48-day-long jury trial. This presentation will show just a sample of the large scope of evidence that was presented. After the defendant was found competent, she petitioned the courts to waive counsel. Judge Stevens required Kyle Green to remain as advisory counsel. Miss Elise rarely sought guidance from Mr. Green while trying to make objections.
And I understand that in the rebuttal phase, the state intends to call a witness who will challenge Mr. Mooney's credentials and challenge his legal claims. And so if this witness is going to be allowed, I've got to refute that because I won't be able to call Mr. Mooney again to refute it. And so either this witness, which I believe is a collateral issue, like a miniature trial as to whether or not my elder is authentic.
There were 3 days dedicated to evidentiary hearings, and additional motions were regularly argued throughout the trial. Religious persecution would be a common argument made by the defendant and even brought upon appeal, but there was no factual basis or direct evidence to support her claims.
Ms. Elise, I want to give you every opportunity to say what you need to say, but I do want to perhaps refocus you.
Yes, I'm going to quote some statutes about
you're claiming
right now.
You're claiming that this was a Catholic conspiracy and a conspiracy by the county attorney. However, this matter was taken to a grand jury. The grand jury returned these charges. So
may I repeat that?
Hold on, please don't interrupt. The grand jury returned the charges. We are here for a jury trial.
Yes.
On these charges.
Yes.
So you are starting with this jury. The state is obligated to present their evidence, and you may cross-examine their witnesses and challenge their evidence. That's your right in this proceeding. The court has already considered the grand jury transcript, and no motion to remand was granted. So unless you can show that there was some inappropriate influence being exerted by the county attorney or some other Catholic official on the grand jury, and you don't have any evidence like that.
Federal Rules of Evidence 401 and 402, relevant evidence was admitted through the use of witness testimony by both parties. The prosecution focused on documentary and real evidence, authenticated through the use of testimony of victims, police officials, and temple prostitutes who were arrested during the raid.
At this point, the state would ask to move State's Exhibit number 7 into evidence, which is a recording of the undercover deal between Detective Cotto and Goddess Kiahi.
Is there an objection to Exhibit 7?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 7 is admitted.
Whereas the defense used more circumstantial, documentary, and demonstrative evidence that spoke to why the temple's practices were lawful and religious acts. Objections of relevancy, narrative, and hearsay were often raised by the prosecution.
Your Honor, I don't know if the state will object, but one of the biggest issues that we're having is that people do not understand how the religion of Tantra, God, Goddess, has anything to do with Mr. Mooney's Native American culture. And he brought with him his peace pipe to demonstrate the bowl is the mother's womb, the stem is the father, they're joined, it's tantric. He wanted to make a demonstration. Will he be allowed to do that?
Are you going to object?
It proves the tantra connection. He wants to explain the male-female with the pipe. It's part of it, and the sweat lodges, those two things. He wants to talk about those two things because they have to do with the union of male and female, their ceremonies.
So this is the first time I'm hearing about this, because in the evidentiary hearing, he certainly, I guess it's something that they probably made up in the last 3 years, but so the idea is the pipe.
Made up?
Hold on.
I'm sorry. So as I understand it, the pipe now has some tantric significance. Is that what I'm understanding?
Your Honor, the three religions that are on trial, and I know you don't think that, but for us, we feel like our religion's on trial. And a big claim that has been made that the jury and everyone doesn't understand is why would the Native American church help a Tantra temple? Why would the Native American church help a goddess temple? Why would they help someone doing sacred sexuality? And he wants to use these physical objects.
If you lay appropriate foundation, he may make a demonstration as long as it's very brief.
Okay, thank you.
There were a total of 41 witnesses. Tracy Elise took the stand 6 times, where her advisory council questioned her using questions she had prepared.
The newsletter would be almost a perfect record of what we were doing each week. It was the things that we were proud of. It was the things we were excited about sharing.
Can we approach briefly?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Green just told me this. Apparently, it's Exhibit 232, labeled PGT Newsletters 2009-2011. I haven't had an opportunity to review it. I don't know exactly what's in here. Just looking at one of the first pages, does not appear to be part of it. It appears to be an email. I would need some time to take a look at this.
Okay.
Furthermore, I don't see the relevance of going through every one of these.
I'm not planning to do any of that. This I want put it into, because I'm accused of illegal enterprise. Anything that's kept as a regularly scheduled business record is an exception to hearsay. And this is a timeline and a visible picture of everything that occurred at the Phoenix Goddess Temple that people gave money to create.
There were many discussions of federal rules of evidence. For instance, the state made a motion to exclude a rabbi from testifying because it wouldn't meet the balancing standards test under FRE 403. After a lengthy oral argument, it was ruled that the testimony would cause confusion amongst the jury.
Ms. Elise is intending on putting forth what is essentially a selective prosecution argument. Our position is that's inappropriate for this jury. It's going to do nothing but confuse the jury. And then certainly what happens in some other ceremony is wholly irrelevant to specifically whether or not there was an exchange of sex for money within the transformation chambers of the Phoenix Goddess Temple. We ask that you grant the state's motion. Thank you, Judge.
Ms. Elise?
Your Honor, men have ruled religion for at least 2,000 years. They have a covenant where they take a baby boy 8 days old and cut away a part of his body as an act of a covenant with their Creator. Your Honor, my covenant to act on behalf of the mother is no less sacred, no less valid. It may be less valid in the eyes of this community because we accept the bris ceremony. I have a rabbi who's willing to come, so why don't we just let it rest, and I will present the rabbi and we will discuss that covenant so that I then have a groundwork to discuss my covenant, which involves things that would otherwise be socially unacceptable.
I'm going to sustain the objection on the ground of selective prosecution. If you intend to bring in this evidence to argue that your church is being selectively prosecuted, I don't think that's relevant, and I think under 403 it's confusing to the jury.
A motion that was granted during pretrial precluded the prosecution from entering hearsay unless approved by the court beforehand. Occasionally, the state would argue an exception under FRE 803.
The information that was going to be presented was not, we were not going to present the departmental report.
Correct.
Ms. Elise, and what this court ruled is Ms. Elise could certainly utilize language that's contained in the DR. When I say DR, I mean departmental report, in her cross-examination of the various witnesses, but each of the detectives is going to testify about what they saw, what they heard. Each of the testifying cooperators is going to testify in their own words. So what is contained in the report is hearsay and can be used in cross-examination, but won't be elicited, the specific language contained in those reports.
At sentencing, before Ms. Elise sang America the Beautiful, the court was reminded by the state of the strong case that was built against her using direct evidence that had foundation and unimpeachable witnesses that were able to authenticate the evidence presented. This case reinforces the importance of the federal rules of evidence.